This is the podcast that we ask our guests from in front and behind the camera, how did they get their foot in the door? What was the key to unlocking their success? What's their story? Our guest today is an Emmy Award-winning casting director. At just 25, she became the head of casting at Universal Pictures, making her one of the youngest studio executives in Hollywood. To comedy favorites including Road Trip and The Whole Nine Yards, and recent horror hits Barbarian and Send Help. Her work has helped shape some of the biggest films of the past 4 decades. We discuss how she discovers the stars of tomorrow, the stories behind casting iconic films, and her invaluable advice to actors. Our guest today is casting director Nancy Nayor. There's such a breadth of work, and we're probably only going to skim the surface on this, but I'd love to ask you, where that sort of love for casting, where did that come from? Right at the beginning, when you were kind of figuring out what you wanted to do, was it something where you were, a young kid, where you wanted to be in the films? Where did it all begin?
I'd say I think it started when I was a young kid. I mean, in multiple ways. I mean, my parents were pretty wild and theatrical. Like my mom was a professional ballerina and my dad was a trial attorney, and they're very dramatic creatures, really. And so I sort of watched them almost on the stage my whole childhood in various ways. And my mom would take me to ballet class, and I thought, man, I can't compete with her, but I'll see if I like it. And I just noticed there were a few problems. Like I loved ballet, but I noticed no one was eating, which was a problem for me. 'Cause
Oh, right.
everyone was like obsessed with staying thin is part of the profession. And I was like, that's not going to work for me because I just love food too much. That won't work. And then I got sent to summer stock camp when it was like, theater camp when I was 13, and I just thought this is heaven. Like I got to be in plays. Actually, my first role was in the Red Shoes, a stage version of the Red Shoes. So I got to play a ballerina. So my mom loved that. And I just got the bug, the acting bug. And so then I was in all my school plays. I was sort of pursuing the acting thing. And then I just thought, I'm going to go to New York and be in theater because that was in school. That was what I did. I wasn't ever thinking I'd wind up in LA, but I thought I'm going to go to New York. And I used to go see a lot of Broadway shows as a kid. We would drive from Boston, where I grew up, to New York for theater weekends. And I was just in awe of what happened, especially with musicals. I was a big musical fan. And so, um, I went to NYU my freshman year and I studied acting with Lee Strasberg, and I thought this is going to be it. And then after school, I did an intern. I thought, you know what? I heard about this internship in casting, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so clever of me. I'm going to go in stealth because I had the feeling, which is true, that casting directors don't have the opportunity to tell everyone. They can't give the report card after every audition. But every actor wants to know, well, if I didn't get it, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? How could I do better? And I thought, this is going to be so clever of me. I'm going to learn all the scoop in this casting internship. And literally, I don't know what happened, but within the first 24, maybe 48 hours, I was like, I, I think I have to move to casting. Casting is it. I just got bitten by a new bug, and it was the one for me. I just fell in love with casting. I got to be around actors all day long. I got to work with actors, read with actors. And, unlike the school plays I was in where I thought I was sort of in the small pond, when I went to Manhattan, it was everyone who was the star in their small pond all came to the same city. And I thought, I'd rather be in a position to help actors rather than compete with them. Like I was maybe good in my little school plays, but when I saw, the giant pond of talent in Manhattan, I was like, I don't need to compete. I don't want to compete. Casting's it.
Wow. So it was a real right turn. You thought you were doing one thing and then you got roped into another. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like a real sliding doors moment.
It was. It was. And I mean, even before I went to summer stock, my mom was in the Boston Ballet, and every year they would do the Nutcracker Suite. And one time she played Clara's mother at the beginning in the party scene before they all go to sleep, and the world comes to life of the Nutcracker. And I was different characters every year. And I just also was in love with just the backstage and the costumes and the sequins and the lights and they would do it at this big theater in Boston. And I thought, this is it. I couldn't imagine anything else. And then suddenly I could, and it was the best decision ever. I mean, this was just more fulfilling for me. I felt it just had my name all over it. And I'd always, as a kid, watch movies and notice, like, oh, the third, waitress on the left, or this small part. I noticed all these smaller roles in a way that other people didn't. So I thought there's something to that. Like, I was fascinated with film and television, and I would just notice all the background players, all the day players, and I would assess them. And I this is not a normal attention that you give to when you watch TV, or movies, but I did.
Before the day of IMDb where you get to look up and see who all these people are, it must have been fascinating,
Yeah.
sort of watching a
Yeah.
movie and then try and
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
it out another way.
Yeah, I
Wow.
was.
What sort of age were you when you kind of started dipping your toe into the casting side of things and, becoming associate casting director, and the first few steps? What sort of age were you? Sort of early 20s? Because I know you stepped in and like sort of around mid 20s, and you became the head of feature film casting for Universal, I believe. So
Yes.
that feels pretty early on. How soon after sort of starting the whole thing was that?
Yeah, that was sort of my pinch me moment, because it was very early and earlier than usual. I was in New York and, working in different casting offices, and I worked for a few agencies just to sort of get a sense of what that was like. And I'd had a colleague who I met at NYU, and he had come out to LA to be in this program called the Stark program, which was about how to become a studio executive. It was like a program where you would work with different divisions, different department heads, and sort of get a sense of what you might like to do in film. And he wound up at Universal, sort of working for an executive there. And he heard there was a feature film that was going to be casting in New York. He knew I was in New York and they needed a casting associate because the casting director was Don Phillips. He had cast Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and he was on his way there to do Cameron Crowe's follow-up, which was called The Wildlife. They were going to cast out of the Park Avenue Universal offices, and he was going to be in for 2 weeks, and he needed an assistant. And my friend, Steve Jacobs at the time, graciously set up a meeting for me with Don, and I wound up being hired for that. And then after the 2 weeks, Don said, we could really use some extra help in LA because we would like to maybe do some outreach to schools, find some local kids, and I have to stay at the office. Can I send you a plane ticket and get you a car and gas money? And, could you come out for a few weeks? And I had a cousin in Santa Monica. So I said, well, absolutely. This sounds fantastic. And the 2 weeks turned into 2 months on that movie. And I was at Universal. So I was parking on the back lot, taking a shuttle van to my office. So I would pass Jaws Lake. I would pass the Psycho House. That was definitely pinching myself. That was the first pinching myself moment at Universal, just to be there, because I'd come out as a kid on vacation with my family. We did the Universal tour, and I never thought I would be working there. So it was 2 weeks. Then it turned into 2 months on that movie. And then the studio was doing Into the Night with John Landis directing, and Mask with Peter Bogdanovich directing at the same time. And they thought they could use some extra help. So they kept me longer. And I wound up as like a casting assistant on those movies. And then I don't know how this happened exactly, but Michael Chinich, who had cast Coal Miner's Daughter and Animal House, he was the head of casting at the time there. And he decided to leave to go run John Hughes' company. John was on the lot, and then he left Universal, and he suggested to the president of production that I replace him. And I thought I was being punked or something, because I was like, I'm 25. I have just arrived here. I've been an assistant, and you're suggesting that I run the casting department at a major studio. So I was floored. I really thought he was teasing. Um, and that turned into 14 years at Universal, and a very fast learning curve, because I think a lot of people in those positions, they freelance for years, maybe decades, like a Marriott Doherty, the casting legends at Warner Brothers. They would freelance forever, and then they would settle into these positions in their later years to oversee casting at a studio. And suddenly there I was, so new in town, and I just got thrown in the water, and I had to learn to swim.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess with something like that, as you say, that's a jump. That's a huge thing. Did you feel the pressure at the time, or were you young enough and I guess green enough to kind of be like, this is fine? And was the pressure there, or
Yeah, it was a combo. There were days where I would just get on the phone and try to fake it till I made it. I would be like, "Come on," and if I was negotiating, I'd be like, "In all my years in the business, I've been here for a nanosecond, but I'm gonna pretend." And I'd feel very confident some days, and other days I'd think, "Oh, someone's gonna tap me on the shoulder and say, what were we thinking? Like, you're too young for this role. We have to replace you." And then I realized, um, that I was easing into it pretty quickly,
Mm,
and it was a test of confidence, really, because you kinda knew if you flinched, you wouldn't stay. You couldn't. I couldn't flinch, so I learned to suck it up, all my
mm,
insecurities, and just keep going. I mean, and it was an incredible time there because I was sort of too busy to notice to be nervous because we had in-house deals with Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, Oliver Stone, Spike Lee, Sam Raimi, Zemeckis, so I was working with these giants of the industry and soaking up so much knowledge from them. When I first got there, they were casting uh, um, Breakfast Club. Joel Schumacher's office was like next to one of my first offices, and Weird Science. So it was John Hughes. Such classic films. I could feel like there was something magical happening in that era. Like every studio has its waves of eras where you think, oh, wow, that was a really productive time and great movies came out of that time. And I felt like when I arrived, I mean, Judd Nelson was in wearing that trench coat for Breakfast Club and throwing a ball against the wall of our building. And I was like, who the hell is out there annoying? I was like, what is that noise? It was Judd. And it was just, it was magical. You could just feel, wow, these projects something's going to be very special about these projects.
I
So,
love
yeah.
that. I love that at the time even you thought, oh, these are going to be special, and so many years later they're iconic. I've actually got, it's not here actually, it's behind somewhere. I've got a poster of two of those films you just mentioned, Weird Science and Breakfast Club. So it just shows you they live on. It's funny you mentioned, being on the Universal lot, and you mentioned Psycho and Jaws, which I believe you did Psycho 3 and you did Jaws Revenge
Yes.
quite soon off the bat. So, two of those things that you drove past every day then became a
Yeah.
reality, which is hilarious, really.
Yeah, and my that first film had Eric Stoltz starring in it, and Eric Stoltz was originally cast as the Michael J. Fox character in Back to the Future, and I would visit in Back to the Future Square where the clock is. I would go and hang out and visit him on the set before he was replaced with Michael Fox, but which was sad, but because I adore Eric Stoltz. He's so brilliant, and it was just wonderful to work with him at the time. But yeah, it was magical, really. I mean, the studio, the only thing that happened after I left is they put in a lot of more user-friendly things like a dry cleaner and a gym. Because I remember thinking, how are you supposed to factor in your work-life balance here? I want to be able to pick up my dry cleaning, but I'm here for crazy hours. And they made it more user-friendly, I think, after I left.
Now for a quick break. We'll be back to the episode shortly. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support us, get early access and exclusive content and episodes, click to join our YouTube channel and become a member now. Please leave us a positive rating. Add us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Life in Film Pod. Essentially, please like and subscribe everything. It makes a huge difference. Thank you. Life in Film has partnered with BetterHelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet, or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, BetterHelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeandfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeandfilm. We are sponsored by movieposters.com. Are you a movie fan? I presume you are. Well, at movieposters.com, you can shop for all your favorite posters in one place. The #1 source for high quality, authentic movie posters. From new releases to cult classics and 100% authentic originals. Thinking of having a browse? Well, if you see a poster that tickles your fancy, as a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off with promo code LifeandFilm10. That's promo code LifeandFilm10. So why not give it a go? And back to the show.
It's funny looking at your credits because it feels like there isn't a film in terms of genre that you haven't done. You've kind of touched on a bit of everything, really. The first one that really jumps out at me, and it's something that as a kid, it was like one of my all-time favorites. But Land Before Time is, one of those absolute classics. And Don Bluth, his films are just, there's something about them. They've got atmosphere to them. They're just very special movies. How do you cast something when it's animation like that and it's not yet drawn?
Yeah. Well, that was my first experience with voiceover because I really was there to do, normal feature films, not it wasn't voiceover seemed like a special skill set, but they gave me that opportunity. And Spielberg was producing. And so I was working a lot with Amblin. And I remember it was either the first one or the second one where we cast Jimmy Stewart as one of the roles. And I got to see Steven Spielberg come to the sound stage or whatever the sound booth was to work with him. And that was just amazing. And I realized all I had to do was close my eyes, and figure out, you read the script, it's the same story. So it's the same process, really. But you realize it's, there's some people whose voices are remarkable on their own. And there's others that it's the combo of the look and the voice. And the voice by itself is not as distinctive, even though they might be a brilliant actor and even a celebrity. So now, the animation's taken over and it's huge and it's become a whole separate, skill set. So I learned at the time how to just close my eyes and listen and get an intuitive feeling for it.
It's funny, isn't it, how it's changed so much in terms of animation. It's a completely different thing now. And as you like, there's loads of competition and loads of films, but I guess back in those days it was like, maybe a handful of really good animations, maybe Disney and then, some others, but those films have really carried through. And because I've got a 9-month-old at home and I'm just waiting for the time where I can sit down and watch something like Land Before Time and hope that it doesn't scare the hell out of him, because it is quite I rewatched it with one of my nephews the other day and I was like, this is absolutely terrifying. I don't remember it being like this as a kid.
Well, you think back to just general, films, cartoons. Bambi, I guess you learn about death through it, but I'm thinking that feels like a harsh lesson because Bambi, I think, is shown to very young children, so it seems weird.
Yeah.
But I guess it's part of life, and so kids learn about it. But yeah, animation's become amazing. I think recently, because my background was film, I've stayed more in, narrative features, and that's really become my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing as I mentioned before, the breadth of different projects that you've done. So, we can go from something like, Flintstones, Casper, but then you can look at, you did one of the Scream movies. You also did Road Trip. You did Freddy Got Fingered, The Grudge. Like, we're talking about films that are they're so different, but they also feel like, when you look at something like Road Trip, that was a huge movie, and those sort of movies were very, very popular. When you're casting something like Road Trip, or you're going along and you're doing something like The Whole Nine Yards, do you ever have an inkling that, those are two hugely successful movies, that, you can put together a great cast, it can have a great script, it can have a great, all the things are there. Do you ever get an inkling that it's going to be a huge success like that? Is there ever sort of a feeling?
You always you have a sense, but you really never know. You really never know. When the 4 films that I remember when I first left Universal and I started my own company, the first 2 films that I did that became hits were The Whole Nine Yards and Road Trip. And actually leaving Universal was when I started my own company. I realized, oh, I have to now explain why people should hire me and why I do and how I do what I do and why I do it better than maybe the other person who's having a meeting on the project, and because people knew me, but they knew me as an executive. So I had to forge my way now, as an independent casting director. And so it just happened, the first two, which were with, I mean, whole nine yards, having Bruce Willis in it. Obviously, he was already a star. Matthew Perry was in this heyday. So, and then Road Trip was Ivan Reitman, who had Ghostbusters behind me, such a great iconic producer. So I had a feeling, based on the teams, that those movies were going to be successful. And I found after those two that I now had this substantial comedy resume post Universal. And so I really enjoyed the comedy world, but I had to explain to people that I really can do dramatic work. I wanted to assure them that I was capable of that. And then suddenly Exorcism of Emily Rose and The Grudge came up pretty, in close proximity. And I thought, oh, especially Exorcism of Emily Rose, it spent a lot of time in the courtroom. And so even though it felt like it's a genre film, it's a lot of courtroom time. Are people going to really lean into this? Is this going to be scary enough? Is the courtroom going to be too heady? And then it was a hit. So I was grateful for that. But then suddenly those two movies, because they became hits, it's like the genre floodgates opened for me and it became a new niche. And I didn't have to sort of apologize for having like so much comedy on my resume anymore. I could just,
Yeah.
claim that I could do all the genres, everything was possible. So
Yeah, it's a really great mixture, and some huge hits, some of the biggest horror films of all time, and right up till like today, like with Barbarian and a movie that I absolutely loved. Actually, it was my favorite movie of, I think it was 2023, but Strange Darling.
oh yeah, I love Strange Darling.
Ah man, and Willa Fitzgerald, her performance is just
Yeah, she's terrific, and
incredible.
JT Mulner's taking off as a writer-director is very exciting to see. And yeah, and Companion, was one of my favorites too. Like there was
Yeah.
the series, and actually, I did Don't Move, which I did a project that and Send Help recently, but it was great to reunite
Send
with
Help
Sam.
was loved
Well,
it so
thank
much.
you. No, I was gonna say because I met Sam at Universal, I was just assigned Darkman, which was one of those wonderful assignments, and I got to meet Sam right after, he had done his whole Evil Dead series, which was pretty much a DIY in your backyard situation,
Yeah.
and people fell in love with his work, and I was just so thrilled to be doing his first studio film, and he was just such a pleasure. But then it's been great to reunite with him, whether it's projects he's produced or directed, now down the road or recently. So happy that we have that continuity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he's one of the greats, isn't he? With I mean, he's a guy that can do all kinds of genres, and is it? It's funny when you get to work with all these icons. You mentioned a few earlier, Spielberg and Ron Howard and all these people. I guess early on, that's like, do you ever get used to that? Now that working with Sam Raimi again many years later, are you kind of, it's
Yeah.
plan, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
you ever
No,
get used to that?
I'm
Yeah.
still excited. I'm still like the kid in the candy store. I
Yeah.
never, it never gets old. I never been like, yeah, I've been there. I'm never blasé about it. I love it. I'm still like, can't believe I do this for a living. And yeah, I remember at the time I was there when Jurassic Park was being formed. And so, uh, s- I remember there was a giant Universal amphitheater on the lot, and all of the staff of the whole studio was invited because it held thousands and thousands of people, for big concert venue. And we were all invited to come and be shown the sort of in the computer renderings of
know.
the Tyrannosaurus Rex and all these things while they're in process. And I was just like blown away. We all had never seen that kind of technology before. And that we realized, wow, this really is something special. But we got to see it in its inception and in its development and be kind of at the, I say, at the studio where it happened, like so many And Spielberg would come to the set of Casper, and we had like cameos with, I think Clint Eastwood did a cameo.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing
starstruck.
cameos in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a kid who's starstruck still, really.
I love that. Yeah, that
You know,
Jurassic Park and seeing that moment, that's a real kind of passing of the torch from stop motion to computer generation. That must have been, it must have been kind of like for the audience when they first saw Star Wars, and been like, wow, what is this? It must have been crazy. I want to go back to Strange Darling because I
yeah.
just absolutely loved it. We had Giovanni Ribisi, who obviously was
Oh,
the DOP on the film. We had him on the show when the film came out. And, I was excited to have him on. So I was like, I'm going to watch this film, kind of not knowing much about it, not kind of, and it really, it honestly, it blew me away. And I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, but it's a film that you don't see coming.
And Giovanni, like I visited the set in Portland, outside of Portland at the hotel, this weird hotel sequence. And yeah, and there was a lot going on that day in the scene, and I just couldn't believe I was seeing Giovanni behind the camera. Like he's a real DP. Like he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's so talented, so multi-talented, and such a great actor. So
Oh,
I
man.
love when people are hyphenates,
Looking at the amount of horror films that you've done over the years, are you a fan of horror? Because it intrigues me that you've always gone back to doing horror. Like might do a comedy and then and you mix it up, but then you do come back to horror. Is it something that you personally enjoy?
I do. I do. I mean, it's funny because I think Send Help is more of a comedy than it is a genre
Yeah.
piece. Like it is, and it was advertised with her like looking all bloody and holding a knife and looking terrifying. But I really think it was much more of a workplace comedy, uh, so I do, and I'm a little more specific now. I think the news these days is so horrific, so I choose films a little more carefully. Like I have an allergic reaction to ones that are just like violent for the sake of violence, even if it starts with something very violent, but then the bad guy, that gets their comeuppance and the good people, prevail. I think I'm just getting more squeamish when it comes to more violence, for and there'll always be violence in films. It's not going away. And I remember I was at Universal in one of the story meetings when we passed on Silence of the Lambs. Like sadly, there's always like the one that got away, but I remember thinking, guy who makes a coat of skin? No, I don't see that. Like that seems gross.
On paper.
I mean, I wasn't responsible for housing. There was a lot of people who kind of were like, no, I don't think so. And, there's always one you think. And there's always actors you realize, oh, I should have said yes to that. Or, and then you see them in something else. You're like, oh, man, they're terrific. But I think I loved watching Obsession recently and Backrooms. I mean, that never gets old for me. And I think it's a genre that keeps reinventing itself. Like it just keeps having a resurgence. You think you understand what it is. And sometimes, actors or reps will get this moment of attitude about, oh no, they're not going to do genre, or they just did a genre. But each one is so unique and has so much different flavors, and depending on the team and the filmmaker and the script. So it's like to make that blanket statement, oh no genre, doesn't make sense because it always surprises you. It always refreshes itself, and just see what's happening with the audiences right now. It's such a great time to be in the genre space. But the crossover of genre and comedy is probably one of the more enjoyable, hybrids for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned their Obsession. That was, an incredible film, and it's been, as you mentioned, a great year for horror. But then Send Help was kind of, horror comedy that started that all off, and you can tell it's a comedy because otherwise my wife wouldn't have gone to see it. So she doesn't like horror, but she really enjoyed that. So it's got that great mixture, which I think Sam Raimi kind of nailed over the years.
Well, I kept having to tell my friends too, who are a little horror, averse, and I would be like, "No, it's really a comedy. You have to go see it." I was thinking the other day, like it's really post-COVID, when we all were working from home, and now everyone's a lot of people are back in the office, that office environments or like office comedies or, office centric stories are interesting now again because we're back, so we have to deal with things that we had a bit of a pause on. We didn't have to deal with the water play, the water cooler conversations or the, competition with our coworkers or whatever it is. Like now it's back.
Yeah, 100%. Well, obviously, Office Romance as well is another one that you did, which has obviously elements of that. It's some of it's set in an office, and comedy being Brett Goldstein, and,
Yeah.
and his comedy is. I really enjoyed that because it felt like a real mix of an American rom-com with
Mm.
British comedy, and there's a particular scene that I can't repeat here. Really caught me off guard. Yeah, very funny. Had me rolling around.
He's incredible. Like he's incredible that he wrote it and got Jennifer to star in it by telling her, I have a list of one, and if you don't say yes, I'm not making the film. No pressure, and it was so good. And then she took it on, and I think they're so great together. And I do love, for me, that had like 50 day players, and I got to cast that out of New York and New Jersey, kind of go back to my Manhattan roots and my New York theater scene, which was wonderful. Because I really find a lot of projects like are shooting in Bulgaria or they're shooting so many different places other than LA or wherever the main cast is being pulled from. And I love being involved with every last little day player, like down to the tiniest little, one syllable part. I feel like those are all parts of like jewels in the crown of the cast. And I don't want to feel that there's this incongruence of, wait, somebody cast the lead, somebody else cast the others. There feels like there's a difference in the vision or the vibe of the people. So I love when I can be involved. I mean, if there's a local casting director in a region that I just am not as familiar with and I need to, watch that process happen, I love to still sort of weigh in and, have an eye on it. But sometimes it's great to be able to go to the location. Like even Jaws: The Revenge, I got to go to Nassau and cast out of the Bahamas. That was fantastic. So, when I can go on location, I love it.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if it's filming something like that, I mean, why not? If you can, it must be a lot of fun. I think what you said there about the day players and the smaller roles. It is so important because if you're watching a film and even one person just seems a bit flat or something's not right, whatever it is, it can take you out of it. And I'm an actor myself, and I think actually sometimes those day player parts are harder because you've got to come in, deliver your whatever it is, a one line, and then go. And it's everyone's already moving, the train's already going, and you're there trying to fit in. It can
Yeah,
be
and
quite
you're not
hard.
always given like that character's backstory. You don't really know a lot. Yeah, you have to somehow make it all fit. It's challenging. And yeah, I mean, I always like people to sort of work themselves into the scene and kind of do a little improv before or something especially one line is impossible. It's so hard. Um,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you do that? You need to ramp up. My idea of like what my likes and dislikes are could be completely different from the casting director down the street because we're all as unique as you are as actors. And so we have different preferences, different things we like, don't like. So, it's good. There's no secret sauce, there's no perfect answer, but for me, I would say like I think these days because self-tapes are happening all the time, it's sort of the few and far between. We'll do callbacks, I think, in offices, but the first round of a lot of the people we see with readings is self-tapes. And I think it helps to not tape yourself in front of an unmade bed or an open, messy closet door. Like sometimes I'm like, wait, just close the door. Like, I don't care if your closet's messy, but I don't really need to see everything inside it. It's a bit distracting. It kind of gives me a sense that the actor is just not, having that quite that level of caring of kind of how they present themselves and I know there's a theory of, well, it doesn't matter. I don't mind if they self-tape on their iPhone in a dimly lit, back alley and create some ambiance for a scene, that's fine. But sometimes I get the feeling people, if their unfinished breakfast is just on the desk in front of them. And I'm like, present yourself in a sort of more professional way. I think people used to do that more when they came into the room. So I think that says something, and it says something about the seriousness of how you treat the audition process and how much you want the role. It's just an extra level of caring, I think. And then in terms of performance, because we don't get to have that chit chat and the banter in the room and get to know the people, I always love when people will do a quick, like, 2-minute chat where they talk about what they've been up to and why they love the project. And if someone doesn't have the time to watch it, fine. But if people do, it gives me a sense of the actor's personality, and their essence, which I think is helpful. We used to love that in the room, and we don't have that anymore, or oftentimes we don't. And I actually like if people do more than one take, because again, in the room, we would say, oh, you know what, maybe try it a little more this way, a little more that way. But if you sort of self-direct a second take, I think that helps, because then we see a variety. Because I think one of the dangers for all actors is to over rehearse a scene and get locked in. When we would be in person, sometimes the director or I would say, maybe try it this way or do it a little differently. And when the person would get a second chance and read it exactly the same way, the same intonation, the same body language, everything, you're thinking, okay, if they get on set and we hire them, it might have been wonderful. But, I've had directors literally give actors in the room really offbeat, direction, just to see if they would follow them and get unlocked out of the way they'd rehearsed something. Because they might have loved something about them, but they felt like, wait, they're kind of stuck in how they prepared. And that's so important. So I think sometimes doing more than one take in a self-tape is, again, if somebody doesn't have the time to watch it, okay. But if they do, then great. They get to see two cool, versions of the scene.
I love that. That's great. That's great advice. And Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And I know you must be extremely busy, so thank you for taking the time out of your day to chat with us. And it's a real joy. Thank you.
Likewise, you too. Thank you again.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support us, get early access and exclusive content, all ad-free, click and join the Life in Film YouTube channel and become a member now. Thank you to our guest Nancy, and thank you to Katie and Zoe at RMG. As always, thank you to our sponsors, movieposters.com and BetterHelp.